the entire foundation of the global financial system will move onto these blockchains, which will be a massive paradigm shift. AI, I think, is almost, I don't know, let's not spend too much time on it. It's pretty obvious, right? Neural networks and learning language models are basically making things possible now that were never possible. These computational systems, they're calling them. Multiomics is the fancy word for all the bio/biotech innovations that are moving beyond merely reading genes. Then we get to robotics. ARK says this is catalyzed by artificial intelligence. Humanoid robots are obviously something that Tesla is working on. It's pretty exciting for us because we're optimists and we like investing in future innovations. And those five big categories really align well with, I think, what we spend a lot of our time talking about and investing in.
Once I start using these AI agents, saying to like Gemini, buy me the best reviewed headphones for under $100. And then the agent is going to do all that research and read the comparison websites and like price check. And it's just going to come back to me and say, I recommend this particular brand, like model of headphones. You can buy it the cheapest here. Like here it is. Like essentially it's going to give me the page which says, click here to confirm the purchase. And so I didn't see with my human eyes any of that advertising. So that's all lost. And that is, I will concede, a major concern for a company like Google, which is leading, like they're building their own AI agents, but they got to really fundamentally re-engineer their revenue model, essentially. SEO and advertising and all that stuff is going to become kind of irrelevant in the future.
This is Wall Street Wildlife. Before we get to this week's show, a short word from our sponsors.
All right. If you're serious about investing, you need to know about public.com. That's where you can invest in everything: stocks, options, bonds, crypto. They even offer some of the highest yields in the industry, like the bond account 6% or higher yield that remains locked in even if the Fed cuts rates.
What sets Public apart is how they give you the tools you need to make informed investment decisions. Their built-in AI tool called Alpha doesn't just tell you if an asset is moving, it tells you why the asset's moving, so you can actually understand what's driving your portfolio performance. Public is a FINRA-registered, SIPC-insured, US-based company with a customer support team that actually cares.
Bottom line, your investments deserve a platform that takes them as seriously as you do. Fund your account in 5 minutes or less at public.com/wildlife and get up to $10,000 when you transfer your old portfolio. That's public.com/wildlife.
Paid for by Public Investing. Full disclosures in podcast description. For an advertising-free version of the show, check out patreon.com/Wall Street Wildlife.
Hello and welcome to the latest Wall Street Wildlife with Krzysztof and Luke. We are going deep on ARK Invest's Big Ideas 2025 deck this week. We got some hot takes on a number of quite interesting slides in their predictions about the world for the year ahead.
How you doing, Badger? You still avoiding avalanches?
I'm good. Like it's a super sunny spring conditions in Chamonix now. I'm more than halfway through my ski season. Today was day 48 on the mountain, and I've been shooting some like fun videos for friends and for the podcast. So you might see those on my Twitter.
48 consecutive days?
Had a few days off, but yeah, 48 days since early January. So it's pretty good going. I haven't missed too many. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Shall I tell you about how Gemini is paying for itself? I think I'm monetized Gemini.
Yeah, tell us about, right. It seems like you never pay for anything. You're always taking other people's poker money. You're always taking my money. You figured things out pretty well.
Well, let's see.
What's the latest Badger scam?
Yeah, my buddies think it is a Badger scam. I'm now Mr. AI. Every year, I've got a bunch of my poker friends, and they have a bunch of different fantasy football bets. And so they were doing the FA Cup fantasy football, and I literally know zilch about football. I have no interest, no idea what's going on. couldn't tell you who's playing, couldn't tell you who the favourites are. And normally their fantasy football stuff is really complicated, and every week you have to like do managers and teams, and I ain't got time for that stuff. But they did like a special one-off, £100 each, and then you just had to pick teams basically from like a bucket of teams. So I got Gemini to do with Gemini 1.5 with deep research. I got that to pick my teams, and we had some successes over the weekend. I had no idea what was even going on, and everyone has thrown in the towel. And it looks like I've now got it locked up for like a £800 win. Awesome, thanks to like Preston United and I don't know, like Everton or someone, or Brighton apparently won 2-0 yesterday, apparently. And so this is it. I'm like, I've got it, almost got a lock. So yeah, thank you, Gemini.
Right. That's nuts. I don't know if that says a lot about you, a lot about AI, or a little about your friends, your poker buddies.
All of the above. Absolutely all of the above. They're mocking me for being Mr. AI, and now Mr. AI is going to take
Yeah.
home the
No,
glory
that's
and the money.
yeah, no, that's really wild. I don't even know. I don't even know what's going on anymore. I'm buried underneath massive amounts of work in academia, but AI is infiltrating that, and I'm talking about it every day to my students, and it's wild. For example, assigning essays or the idea of writing an essay. Well, now it's like it's not it's just so far from something you could just do is assign an essay and show me your thinking on paper. Like, what does that even mean anymore? So anyway, it's a wild world.
You big brain guys, you'll figure it out.
Right. Okay.
Focus on the end goal that we talked about the other week, like educating students and making them ready for the world.
Yeah, that's what I blab on about all the time. It's just now the methods of how you do that is more complicated. For one, I will tell you that as I'm taking it, did I tell you I'm taking Italian at the university? After I finish teaching, I go to Italian class.
Cool.
But it's wild. Now, I get exercises or things to complete, but I'm using AI integrally. I'll take a snapshot of, say, the workbook, upload it to AI, and then the amount of explanations and examples I get is just absolutely fascinating. I remember part of your thesis against Duolingo. I'm not sure how that's working out, but it was like that AI will become a better foreign language tutor, and that's what it feels like. I have my own little Italian speaking boss, right over my right shoulder. So
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Are you actually using it to converse, like speak to ChatGPT or Gemini in Italian?
no, I'm not speaking to it, and that's mostly because my wife speaks Italian, so I kind of have a live-in speaker, but I have not gotten to that level. Right now I'm learning grammar stuff, so it's correcting.
Awesome. Good stuff. Don't get disintermediated, you educator. You got much to add to the world. Shall we talk briefly? Before we get into the big topic today, let's reflect on a conversation we had 2 weeks ago, because I did a poll with our Patreons. Episode 68. Now, if I got this right, you shared your portfolio, which was like massively EOS, 43% EOS at the time, 16% AST SpaceMobile, a bunch of other stocks and some like really small stuff. And your question to me was, I want to have more ASTS. How should I get there? And I think we kind of arrived at three options. One was to like trim EOS because you don't want to have 43% in one position. One was like your preference, which I think was to sell a bunch of the small stuff. And then I think you kind of reluctantly, I don't know if you accepted my advice, you'll tell us in a second, but my advice was like 16% ASTS is plenty. Be happy with that. So we asked our Patreons, and as you can see, it looks like more than half our Patreons agreed with me. 16% is a fine position. So what did you do?
Can you believe that I did nothing? I did do nothing, but it is the first of the month, or rather, the first of the month just triggered. So we have 200, Monkey has 200 fresh bananas sitting right there. But curiously, this week, EOS and ASTS report earnings in the front half of the week. So that's important for my companies precisely because we're essentially pre-revenue right at the beginning of that hockey curve.
Right.
So delays or unexpected positive announcements could have major impacts on the share price. So it's a very, very volatile and I wouldn't say precarious time, but much can change very quickly. And so I decided to basically wait until processing the earnings report and then either be happy with my already large positions, or if the stocks drop with nothing thesis breaking, which I can't foresee that being the case, then adding even more cheaply. So
Yeah, awesome. That's great.
the wisdom of the crowds won out this time.
Yeah, good man, good man. And I wonder if that actually takes us into our headline topic for today, which is going to consume most of our episode conversation, because we are digging into the ARK Invest Big Ideas 2025 deck. They publish it every year. Because we were just chatting about your ASTS position, and I think maybe an interesting place to start in that ARK deck is to talk about some of their thinking around space and launch providers and SpaceX in particular. But before we do you want to give us a bit of an overview of like what this thing is and like their 5 big categories?
Yeah, sure. So, as I was reading this deck, right up front, they have a title called Five Innovation Platforms that are catalyzing accelerated growth. So, I think it's important to just slow down with just that. They're talking about platforms, all these things. This won't be a surprise to anyone to hear that AI is a thing. I mean, at this point, it's silly to even talk about. But I think it's the catalyzation of accelerated growth that's all these fields, these 5 fields are obviously growing quickly, but the idea is that they will grow even more quickly. And how is the main takeaway. The 5 are public blockchains, AI, multiomics, which I'll define in a bit, energy storage, and robotics. And what was cool for me looking at those 5 categories is that they actually map out really nicely to all my top positions in the King of the Jungle portfolio. I think I have a obvious representative in each, spread across each of these 5 categories, which is, I think, what you want as an investor investing in future growth, right? You want to have a little piece of the pie in the major categories that are set to accelerate in their growth. So, does it make sense to sort of talk about each of these a little briefly and give an example or define them a little bit better?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. I'm not invested in all of these categories, and actually I steer away from a couple of them. But if you've got something everywhere, then yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, sure. So public blockchains, I think that's pretty obvious. But the thesis for me is that the entire foundation of the global financial system will move onto these blockchains, which will be a massive paradigm shift. And I will stand to benefit from this if, in fact, it happens. And Chainlink is the protocol that basically underpins most of it. So that's one aspect of it. AI, I think, is almost, I don't know, let's not spend too much time on it. It's pretty obvious, right? Neural networks and learning language models are basically making things possible now that were never possible. These computational systems, they're calling them. We have, in my portfolio, I have access to Nebius, which is the company NBIS that is building data centers and helping companies get their AI game up. Multiomics is the fancy word for all the bio/biotech innovations that are moving beyond merely reading genes. So now you have things like the actual DNA code, but then you're also looking at the proteins and you're looking at the epigenes and you're looking at transcription stuff. And there's all these factors that are data dependent that work together to accelerate the rate at which we're going to start curing stuff. So my representative there, quite obviously, is Relay Therapeutics, which I'm naming as one of the most undervalued companies in the whole space right now. Then we get to robotics. ARK says this is catalyzed by artificial intelligence. Humanoid robots are obviously something that Tesla is working on. They mentioned 3D printing, and they're also talking about reusable rockets. So I'm thinking, yeah, like the way actual like futuristic robots will one day be in your kitchen. And my obvious example for from the portfolio is Tesla. Yours is Rocket Lab. And then the fifth category they talk about is energy storage, that the prices of energy are going down. And they also mention a category called distributed energy generation. And this is the fact that up to now, you have big, gigantic, call it utility plants. But now we are on the way to building smaller, more local sources of energy that basically take the pressure off from these gigantic monoliths. You tie them together with the renewables, and then, to my thesis, you then find a way to store all that energy locally, and you have basically a bunch of microgrids that are much more resilient. And that is obviously why EOS is my biggest position, because they stand to benefit from the energy storage side of it. It's pretty exciting, for us, because we're optimists and we're future. We like investing in future innovations, and those five big categories really align well with, I think, what we spend a lot of our time talking about and investing in.
Yeah, absolutely. And in previous podcasts, you might have heard me cast aspersions at ARK. But one thing I do like about ARK is they do good research. They got smart folk who are plugged into the industry. They do this kind of really good horizon scanning, what's important, and they try and draw interesting conclusions about like technologies, but also like the convergence of technologies and how things stack together to like change the world in quite interesting ways. And so I do highly recommend reading this deck in full, at least just skimming it, page turning it. It's like 150 slides. I'm sure ARK have got their own podcasts, like go check those out. I draw the line at ARK's actual stock recommendations because I'm very skeptical about their valuation models and their track record, frankly, but their research is solid. And so I look at this every year for the last couple of years. And if you go back a year, I think we dived into the Big Ideas 2024 deck.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Badger. It's kind of astounding to me the extent to which they have made such poor investing decisions. T-Doc, for example, is something that comes to mind. I think it used to be one of their top positions at one point. But that's the thing with futuristic ideas. Like, it sounds great on paper, and we thought telehealth would be the next big thing because this one company had the lead, but then all of a sudden, the future is different than we think. And
Yep.
T-Doc is one of the worst investments of the last few years, just a massive loss of capital. So be careful, right? Our listeners, it's like I've fallen into this trap many times. The story sounds really good and exciting. You have ARK presenting it with all kinds of shininess, but you really can't know for sure until you've done a lot more work, I think, on your own end. And even then, be careful.
Yeah, do your own research and like be skeptical about everything you read. Like try and find multiple sources and try and find your own clarity of thought around whether the thing, like the idea you're investing in, is something. Well, my framework is something the world needs more of, might need more of in the future or not. You might have your own framework, but don't just read and then slavishly copy what any other investor or research organization puts out.
Right. No matter how shiny and how well funded. There is one slide early on that I also like to draw our attention to. Badger, I'm sorry this wasn't in our episode prep, but I looked at it and it's an obvious point. There's this, I think on slide 10, they have this image entitled called Convergence is Accelerating the Technology Revolution. So they're sort of a map how those five categories we just mentioned, they're not isolated. They're all actually sort of playing with one another.
Mhm.
And the obvious example for me that I'm paying attention to is the AI category. Basically, is to me, it's sort of the linchpin of all of this. Requires a bunch of new data centers and requires a bunch more energy to work. That is directly connected, therefore, to the distributed energy generation field that is needed. A different way of saying that is because AI is accelerating, I'm going to benefit as an investor from that, but I'm also going to benefit from EOS because EOS is making that possible and they're sort of together. And in this case, actually, from my own portfolio, Iris Energy, they're much more direct play on the whole building up warehouse stuff, but they're interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we take a couple of these slides and drill in a little bit deeper? Because I think we both had thoughts on some of ARK's ideas. And I guess, like, I introed this segment saying, hey, ASTS and SpaceX. Why don't we start with the rockets category? Because I saw an interesting slide about the proliferation of small launch providers. So this is quite an interesting observation by ARK, I think. And essentially they're saying, like, industries tend to consolidate, particularly where like they're young, new industries. And we see this all the time with, for example, cybersecurity, like tons of consolidation there around the leaders over the last few years. Either some companies fail and fall by the wayside, or they get acquired because they've got like good IP or customer engagement, whatever, in certain geographies. And ARK have observed how this is happening in the space industry. And to quote from their slide, today only 17 of the 194 small launch providers created since 1996 are operational. This is quite an interesting place to start, I think, because like clearly SpaceX is way past like the curve. They're now, well, they are almost the entire industry. They're massive. And I'd make a good argument that Rocket Lab similarly are over the hump. They're transitioning into their Neutron program, and there's going to be some challenges there, but they're well capitalized. They've got their space system segment. They're generating like operational income, so almost kind of self-sufficient. And the transition to Neutron, like medium lift, could be bumpy. It could be painful, but I'm relatively confident they're going to get there at some point. Maybe not 2025, but at some point. But then, you and I talk about a whole bunch of other space companies, and I know ASTS aren't a launch provider per se, but maybe the same argument might apply to them. Like companies in this young nascent industry, like the majority are probably going to fail, not succeed. What do you make of that?
I don't know. And maybe that's a good thing because it feels like the obvious point you're making is that what the big guys, the well capitalized, or the ones who've already passed an existential crisis, will only grow larger, as is the way of capitalism.
Mhm.
Makes it more likely that the little guys won't win just because that's what happens everywhere. But aside from that, making more, for me to make a comment about an industry that, one, I'm not an expert in, like in an engineering sense, but also because it's so brand new and I don't know what I don't even know. I would assume on that first point, you're right. And on the second point, who the hell knows?
This is not like an indictment on ASTS because they're not a launch provider, but there are a bunch of other, like if I think about all the other space companies I know, the only one that probably has a guaranteed chance of success in my mind is probably like Blue Origin, only because they've got like the backing of Jeff Bezos and his like bottomless billions of dollars that he can just keep pumping in to make them successful. And hey, I saw in the news Bezos is about to like launch. Katy Perry, plus Bezos's other half, are apparently going to go up on a Blue Origin flight. So that guy's got to get it right.
Right. He failure here would be bad.
Yeah.
The only thing I could comment on with any sense, even modicum of intelligence, is that I do see rocket launches as becoming commoditized, and maybe sooner than later. And that's why I don't worry about that aspect of it for ASTS. As with most things, the more launches, the more, I mean, like you said, we've passed the sort of critical moment where what SpaceX was down to its last launch will face bankruptcy, right? Had we not cleared that hurdle, it would be a whole different story. We cleared it. The engineers obviously now know, it's now seems like more about refinement and speed. Like you said, the big guys are well capitalized. I don't see how it just gets cheaper and cheaper and more reliable going forward, especially with the reusable stuff.
Yep. And actually, that's a great segue as well to another slide in the ARC deck, because they talk about exactly that, which is the ever decreasing, almost exponentially decreasing cost in for SpaceX in launching reusable rockets, and also like the time between the reuse of a rocket, which is like coming down and down and down. So yeah, according to ARK, like one Falcon 9 now costs less than $1 million to refurbish. That's essentially their launch cost, right? Refurbish the thing, refuel it, and then that's it. Like shoot it off again, and then you've put like the next payload in orbit. Those costs are dramatically lower than they used to be, and the turnaround time is dramatically lower. Like when SpaceX started, it was like 356 days, evidently, turnaround time, like relaunching a booster. And now they've got that down to 14 days. So that's pretty wild.
Listening to all this does make me feel it's hard not to feel bullish when you hear stuff like this, that the both the rate of enhanced technologies is accelerating and that's enabling the dropping of costs. So when we're still in this kind of stagflation-ish
Yep.
macro period, that's how I'm experiencing it anyway, right? Where costs are going up, but the money's still being pumped in and inflation, all that stuff. It does seem like this is our way out, right? To innovate our way out of this mess. And the numbers, according to this sort of optimistic future, the optimistic futurists are making it seem like, yeah, all kinds of things are about to be unlocked for cheaper. And that's increased GDP growth, which could take care of the potential looming recession.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, absolutely.
Was the only other time we've been on this kind of cusp as investors, but we didn't exactly know it, was what, 26 years ago at the advent of the internet,
Hmm.
right? Where you could feel sort of like, oh, things are really going to get different, become different. But even those impacts from the internet took, well, I don't even know how to think about this. Like it took before the world changed, like fundamentally, I don't know, was it a decade? But even then, it was like the rate wasn't anywhere as quick as it is now.
It's an interesting analogy, isn't it? Because if you were like an early adopter of that kind of stuff and you were using like pets.com and all these other like really early e-commerce type capabilities, the world got super excited, but then we had like the .com bubble essentially, because I guess big businesses plowed a ton of money into this new like frontier for commerce, but like things had to evolve and mature and society had to get used to that. And now it's generated incredible societal value, the internet, but in a very different way perhaps to was first envisaged. And I wonder, like maybe space will be somewhat similar, because it's a good analogy. Like we're driving down the cost of launch, we're starting to put like communication satellites and monitoring and weather tracking and all sorts of other stuff, but kind of who knows how we're really going to monetize space and explore, sort of use the capabilities that we're creating with these launch providers, like super low cost, super high frequency, probably stuff that we can't quite imagine today.
Well, with an obvious counter to that being ASTS, and I am prepping a long deep dive, and that's going to happen. But there are some things that are to me already obvious and already kind of in hand, in the sense that it's just a matter of execution. They can't launch the whatever, all the numbers of their satellites that they need, but that's going to happen over the next whatever 12 months. It's a kind of a waiting game, which then once those are up, we know the way your phone basically changes overnight. You now have access all the time from anywhere. So the planet changes overnight, literally. That's the kind of the bull case for the company. It's a flip of the switch, and the technology already works. So that's already proven, right? I guess the analogy from the internet days would be what? Like Google search worked. We knew it worked. It was just going to be a matter of time before it kind of got bigger and bigger. We just couldn't foresee that it would become a verb,
Right.
right? That just integrate into people's lives so pr- primordially that there's no alternative. So I think there are places as investors we can look that are pretty obvious. And you have to always do your research, I think, in separating the what pie in the sky kind of like complete, like, yeah, this is going to be the best thing ever, but also from the shorts or from the bears that try to, spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt. uh, usually for their own market positioning purposes. So there's no shortcut, right? There's no shortcut when you're trying to predict the future. But there are, what as we say in poker, there is the thing thinking bets, and you know when you're holding good cards and when the probabilities are in your favor.
Yeah, like maybe there's like this is an appropriate point for that Donald Rumsfeld quote, right? Like your known knowns, your known unknowns, and your unknown unknowns. Because there's a whole bunch of known unknowns to do with space, but there's probably like another whole category of stuff that we just have yet to realize is going to be a problem, either in like an engineering challenge or a commercialization challenge.
Okay, so let me riff a little bit more on this because you've talked about this industry way more than me. But I think so, for example, with ASTS, there's the obvious. There's the known that your phones are going to be much better, right? Okay, sure. But what we're not really, I guess most investors probably are not thinking in the way all of the world's defensive infrastructure changes when all of a sudden every last, I guess, military operation has unlimited access to signals, right? So the whole Internet of Things is empowered in a way that it has never been empowered before. And that's why, for example, what's it called? The CEO of your company, Andrew Palmer Luckey, why he's an ASTS investor, because he understands the, what's it called? The defensive contract side of things. But we don't know how that's going to actually play out, right? Like we know the frontier. I don't know anyway. Maybe the experts do. But that's a whole nother dimension of this stuff that's so wild and kind of beyond imagining that it's hard to predict, quantify in many ways.
Yeah, but hard to
But it's
argue we're not at the start of this, like next, not the final frontier, like Star Trek, but like this next frontier. Very exciting place to be investing right now. Should we come back down to earth and talk about energy for a bit?
yes, tell us what we need to know from ARK about energy.
I'm not a big energy guy, but I thought I'd throw this slide in because, like, you are an energy guy, right? You like that stuff. But I did roast this guy in 2026 about Oklo, so I'm probably going to have egg on my face because I basically like put Oklo on as a Safari stock back when it was like a $2 company, and now it's like a 20-something dollar company. Okay, whatever. But I think I'm plugged into this space. Like I did recommend New Scale Power, and so the whole, for me, like my investing thesis around this stuff was the need or the benefit that safe nuclear power, modern nuclear power, could bring to like the overall energy equation. And it seems like ARK agree as well because they're flagging, I'll quote from their slide, solar, wind, and stationary energy storage are just getting started. One solution will not meet all demands. And they're talking about nuclear as being part of that energy equation, but clearly like solar and wind and batteries, like big static batteries, a bit like the ones that EOS makes, but a bunch of other folk make as well, are a key factor in like addressing our ever increasing energy demands. And the main reason I threw this slide in was Tesla, because this really surprised me. I had no idea. Tesla accounts for 19% of global energy storage today. That's a pretty phenomenal number.
I'm holding back on because I feel like an EOS rant coming on, and I'm trying to spare you from that. So uh, you're saying it's phenomenal because
I'm shocked. Like we know about like Tesla Energy as being one of their segments, and you know, and when you think about Tesla, like it is an energy company as well as being like an AI company and a cars company and everything else. But I had no idea they had. Like I've read the stories about what that big static battery they put in Australia years ago, and I'm sure they've done like a ton more of things like that. I had no idea they're like nearly 20% of all the static batteries we have in the world is
right.
Tesla. That's a lot.
That is not news to me because that's precisely what I've been looking at, with as much excitement on their earnings calls
Mhm.
as their car stuff because of EOS. So when I see they're growing that segment over in triple digits, I think it was 114% just off the top of my head last quarter. And their solution is in many ways, not always, because that's unfair, but in many ways inferior to what EOS is making. And EOS is the sort of like pure play on the same sort of idea. It just doesn't catch fire as one of the main components and it's longer lasting, blah, blah, blah. Then I get extremely excited about this exact segment. So, yeah, it's a massive opportunity for both Tesla and for all the other companies that can figure it out and do something a little bit better or different. Not even better, different will suffice.
You're the energy guy, but I guess a bit like all those other exponential graphs we were just looking at, like the cost of energy storage is coming down and down, I assume. And this is probably why, presumably, Trump is so keen to get his hands on Ukraine's like rare earth metals, because we need some of that stuff to build some of the infrastructure, build the semiconductors, build the batteries.
I mean, this fits in right to the knot, that Gordian knot in the middle. That AI is just, I don't know, the way I think of it, Badger, is like every so often the world changes so radically.
Hmm.
It's mind blowing, but all of these changes run on electrons. I mean, right? Everything,
Yep.
the digitization of everything. So those electrons, we just need massive amounts more of them. But then once you gobble them up, like with the sun and night, the whole thing, the fact that the earth spins around and there's nighttime and you can't generate it with solar, right? You got to hold them somewhere.
Yep.
So all these things really work together. You can't have your AI without having your batteries, or you can't run these massive whatever inference language models without the electrons. Or, last point, this is another thing worth considering. All the electric vehicles that are coming, right? They run on what? Batteries. What do batteries require? Electrons. Where are these electrons going to come from and how are they going to recharge? Again, batteries. So for anyone listening to this, I think you got to almost like reset your mind to update it or maybe perform a new software install to from what you used to think batteries were or how important they were to a whole new level of importance and integration.
Good segue again, because that actually nicely brings us on to another ARC slide about autonomous vehicles. Because as these things roll out and we get more and more of them in different formats and shapes, like trucks and little buggies that drive around the pavement, that's really going to change society. And ARC has some thoughts on that as well as different. So, here's their autonomous vehicle slide on screen, right? So you've got like big transportation by road, like big trucks. You've then got like smaller, like vehicle sized, car sized logistics, again, autonomous. And then, like I haven't seen one live, but maybe in university campuses in some places in the States, you see like these little like buggies, like 1 foot high, like scooching around and delivering pizza and delivering like textbooks and whatever it is that um, the students want. Like this stuff's making its way slowly into the real world, and that's really going to change the way we operate as consumers. Because suddenly the cost of things like Amazon Prime, we had a great conversation with Matt Cochran in last week's episode. Matt, like super friend of the show, a very smart guy, and he had some great anecdotes about logistics and Amazon's dominance. We talked about like the Magnificent Seven. Like, go check out last week's episode if you want to hear that in full. Last week we talked about same day delivery becoming almost ubiquitous. Well, as these like drone deliveries and little buggy deliveries really start to take off, certainly in urban areas, like most stuff you'll be able to get within an hour, maybe even sooner, right? Because you've got this cunning Amazon intelligence, which probably knows what you're going to order before you even order it. Like, you hit the buy button and the thing's like, oh, it's at your door, by the way, because we knew you were going to order that thing.
So two questions for you. Are you talking about the kind of world where after a day of skiing, you're cold, you come in from the mountain, you get back to your chalet, and before you even sit down, there's a little thing whirring, bringing you your rum infused Negroni,
Yeah.
like just just places it, pops it in your hand just by knowing your patterns from the day before.
I got that already. My buddy Jonas makes a mean Negroni. So yeah.
Wild to think about. Two, what year do you think legitimately will be the sort of threshold year where people genuinely think to themselves, it's no longer worth owning a car? That owning a car is, call it, I don't know if I would say stupid, but the way people stopped owning horses and buggies, at some point it was just like outmoded. It's 2025 now. When does that happen?
Longer, I think, than the technology. Like, so I think it's a generational thing. So I don't like most teenagers. Is it Gen Z? I don't know, like 20-year-olds, whatever that generation is. Like most of them haven't, I gather, or at least like a significant number have not bothered like passing their driving test because they can rely on Uber and Lyft and other companies like that and their equivalents in other, remoter parts of the world. And so I think when, as that generation and like people younger than that become, as they kind of grow up, mature, right? A majority of them probably would never have owned a car and would just never think about owning a car. Whereas when I was 17, thousands of years ago, like the very first thing I wanted to do as soon as I passed my 17th birthday was go get my first driving lesson and like try and fast track my way to being a vehicle owner. It took me like 3 goes to pass my test because I was a fuckwit. But uh, but like I was delighted. Like as soon as I passed my test, I was like to my dad, like help me figure out how to buy a car, and I had my first car as soon as I could because that was such an important part of my life and how I wanted to navigate the world. But that stuff's just irrelevant to kids these days and young adults, right? So there's certainly going to be demand for vehicles, but they'll be autonomous, not human driven. But I think like it's the old guys, we have to kind of age out of vehicle ownership because I'm always going to own a vehicle, a car or a motorbike or something. And if I get rid of the current car, I'm going to replace it with something fancier. Maybe I'm probably never not going to own a vehicle just because that's kind of my mindset.
All right, if you're serious about investing, you need to know about public.com. That's where you can invest in everything: stocks, options, bonds, crypto. You can even earn some of the highest yields in the industry, like the 6% or higher yield you can lock in with a bond account.
Public is a FINRA registered SIPC insured platform that takes your investments as seriously as you do. Fund your account in 5 minutes or less at public.com/wildlife and get up to $10,000 when you transfer your old portfolio. That's public.com/wildlife.
Paid for by Public Investing. Full disclosures in podcast description.
Wall Street Wildlife is brought to you by the Chit Chat Stocks podcast. That's right, another investing podcast you need to add to your listening rotation. My name is Brett, one of the hosts, and I produce 2 episodes weekly along with my co-host, Ryan Henderson. On the Chit Chat Stocks podcast, we talk a lot of stocks, from the hottest names to undiscovered gems, interviewing sector experts, studying super investors and why they are successful, and having a fun time while doing it. Follow the Chit Chat Stocks podcast on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, and never miss an episode. That's the Chit Chat Stocks.
Yeah, it's just wild to think about, man. I liked your example of the rite of passage phasing out, but as you were talking, it just clicked to me like that if I'm a teenager now, it's just wild to think that I don't need to rely on my parents to pick me up, to get me. I mean, Musk, we know, is predicting this paradigm shift probably sooner than reality will let him. But then again, I'm in the epicenter of all this in Austin. So if all the regulatory stuff falls on, call it Tesla's side or Musk's side, I could kind of foresee by 2030, if Austin has a bunch of the robotaxi things just whizzing around, and then my registration comes up and my car insurance comes up, all these payments come up, I'm like, why pay all that money? Or actually, here's the little middle step between that. Right now, both my wife and I have a car, so we have 2 cars. I could easily see one of them going away.
Yep.
Because that double, so okay, so we both need it, so one of us will take the robotaxi and the other, right? So even by that logic, you reduce the cars on the road by what, 25%?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, like there probably won't be like a hard transition. We're just going to slowly drift into like vastly reduced private vehicle ownership, where all vehicles on the road are just owned by corporations, and then you lease them for an hour a day, whatever you need for your particular journey or particular thing you're trying to make happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
And there is another slide in the ARK Invest deck that brings a bit of that journey to life. ARK was sharing in one of their slides the reduction in Tesla's cost per mile and how competitive it is versus Waymo. You and I have chatted about Alphabet's Waymo. I've made the argument, I think a strong argument, that actually they're probably ahead of Tesla in terms of actual FSD, because they are actually doing it, albeit in geofence locations. Once Tesla kind of catch up in terms of their capability, which might well be Austin first, the fact that Tesla are putting vehicles with this capability on the road at such a lower cost base because they don't have like LiDAR, they have massive efficiencies for their vertical integration of their manufacturing capacity, and they are going to succeed. They're going to outcompete Waymo at some point, and they've just got the data advantage as well, right? Because they've got like hundreds of millions of cars collecting billions of miles every day, pretty much right now, which is going into their big AI model to help it learn how to drive.
Yes, I don't know if I have much more to comment on that.
Mm.
It's pretty obvious.
So that we were talking about autonomous vehicles just there, and I suppose robots. I'm going to pick that slide out of the ARK Invest deck as well. Like robots are kind of like autonomous vehicles in your home, and again, I think ARK is sharing some quite interesting statistics around how robots, well, in the home, but actually what ARK are talking about here, and I think it's an interesting insight, is robots in like the commercial space. And they've made the observation, which hadn't occurred to me, but I think is very true, that small businesses, little companies, are going to benefit disproportionately from humanoid robots. And let me sort of run the logic by you and see if this gels with you as well. Because if you're like a massive organization, like I say, Amazon, right, and they've got Kiva, whoever it is, they got their millions of robots, whatever they've got now, whizzing around their warehouses, moving things around. Like they have these highly specialized robots to do like high frequency, high capacity to do one job really well. And so that's the kind of model that works when you're like a giant, like an Amazon. But if you're like some little company, you've probably actually got, let's say you're like, 10 to 100 staff members, human staff members. And if you're like a blue collar type, well, if you're a white collar kind of company, you're probably replacing those people with software like LLMs and different stuff. And if it's a blue collar kind of job, maybe like a small construction company, or you're manufacturing like small volume manufacturing, or I don't know, haircuts and manicures or whatever like the hell it is, right? Making cakes. If we have humanoid robots, which are then like the world has been designed for humans with like two hands and two eyes, well, those small companies are going to get a significant benefit because they can like directly replace some of the more boring, repetitive jobs that their humans do with one or two robots, which might cost them like $20,000 or $30,000, and they have to charge them up every night. But then, if a one robot lasts you like 5 years, well, you didn't have to keep paying that human salary. You got like many years worth of stuff, and the robots can be working like 24/7 through the night. So you can see the impact on like margins for smaller companies, and how robots are really going to change that thing, which is going to help all consumers because it's going to make like goods and services cheaper, perhaps better quality, perhaps more reliable, repeatable. What do you think?
Man, this is mind blowing to me, just thinking about this stuff, honestly. We poo pooed the Tesla robotaxi presentation. Now, that was what, 6 months ago?
Mm.
But one of the things we saw were the human robots dancing around and serving drinks, right?
Right.
As you were talking, there's obviously the way corporations that could afford these things right up front will benefit. But then immediately I thought of having my own little robot house cleaner, and obviously as an early adopter you would be paying up out the nose for the privilege, but let's say 5 years after the first one debuts, think about what a massive industry the home cleaning industry is,
Yep.
right? But then think about how quickly LLMs learn, how quickly, like the Roomba version, the sort of, the Roomba goes around, learns the map of your house, how exciting that was. Now you no longer need to sweep your floors or whatever. But imagine having an actual thingamajig that learns how to clean every surface and, whatever. You leave the house for 4 hours, you turn it on, and you come back and you have a sparkling house. Like, that's like legitimately, to me, doable, right? At this point.
Yeah, well, there are obviously still major engineering like barriers to cross, but like we're certainly on the path to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying it's no longer like sci-fi,
Oh yeah,
like, or
totally.
in the Rocky movies, there's
Yeah.
I don't know, right? There's one of the characters gets a little robot thing
Yeah.
for his birthday. I can't remember, right? But at that point, what was that? That was just a box that like had lights and rolled around. It's weird to say, yeah, the future is now, but then I was thinking, right, I mean, this gets us to that universal basic income conversation pretty darn fast. I
Mhm.
think, you start taking away all these jobs. I mean, how many industries depend on these kinds of menial tasks is staggering, and that many of them can be replaced, might be replaced, is just like wild to think about.
I'm an optimist, and so I think there are solutions that aren't just about UBI, universal basic income, but like we'll always think of other things for humans to do. We're just more like this stuff is magnifying our impact and our ability. And it's getting rid of like the really boring stuff that, frankly, no one wants to do. But yeah, like I'm no argument. It's going to be a vastly different world. And as someone who certainly plans to buy one of these things as soon as it's available as well, like I'm super looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, there is a slide on this deck titled "Jobs Are Bundles of Tasks,"
Mhm.
and it's the cost of dishwashing, which includes wash dishes, glassware, place clean dishes, store them, remove trash, all these things that are not that complicated. Once, put it this way, if Tesla can literally solve driving, right, in complex situations, then surely the put away a few dishes and mop the floor is just not even close in terms of level of difficulty, and the time spent, right, billions is staggering.
Well, I'd argue that they are the same problem. Like you're trying to understand the world and achieve some kind of outcome. And if you happen to be like a robot, a car shaped robot, you're understanding like the traffic and the pedestrians, and you're trying to get from where you are to some other location. And if you're like a humanoid shaped robot in a house, then, yeah, you're trying to turn like dirty dishes into clean dishes and get them back in the cupboard. The same kind of thing. Like see, understand, and then take action. There is an ARK slide, which is much closer to what's happening right now, because like with humanoid robots, we're talking about like physical AI in the real world doing stuff. And that might be a little, you're right, it's not science fiction, that's coming, but it's still like coming soon. But stuff that's here now are essentially like software robots, agents, agentic AI. And there's a couple of, there's like Operator from OpenAI. I've not used it, I'm looking forward to using it. There's a bunch of tools from Gemini. Jarvis, I think, is like one of the code names. And there's one from Perplexity, I think. And essentially, like it's early days right now. The way some of these agents are working, I don't know if you've looked at some videos. It's like the robot, the AI, takes control of your laptop, maybe takes control of your browser, and it literally like pushes the mouse around and clicks buttons, and it tries to achieve some kind of outcome for you, like booking a vacation or researching like the next fancy vacuum cleaner and then buying it. We're starting to use this stuff now, and I think this is going to be incredibly powerful. And I'm going to concede something to you on in before we wrap up this conversation, because I think you're right about one of my portfolio holdings, and now I'm thinking a bit harder about it. But
Mm.
anyway, before I
Are you
concede,
gonna say it? Are you gonna? Uh oh.
um, well, it's good. Alphabet. Alphabet is the one I'm conceding perhaps concern about. Now, I think you're right, because, well, let's take the big picture view, right? So, like today, if I want to buy, I don't know, a new pair of headphones or something, right? I might go and look at a few different websites and do my research, and then I'll do a bit of price comparison and see where I can get it the cheapest, and I'll look at, how quickly can I get it, and do they have like a decent guarantee and all that sort of stuff, and then I'll buy the thing, and then it'll get shipped to me, and great, I've got my headphones. So it's like a bunch of work I did there, and in the process of me doing that work, like different websites are pushing a whole bunch of advertising to me, and I'm kind of seeing it, and like maybe Sony managed to sell me their headphones because they know I'm researching headphones rather than whichever other manufacturer I might have been intending to buy. So like in the future with like these, once I start using these AI agents, like my e-commerce journey might be me literally saying to like Gemini, buy me the best reviewed headphones for under $100. And then like the agent is going to do all that research and read the comparison websites and like price check, and it's just going to come back to me and say, like, I recommend this particular brand, like model of headphones. You can buy it the cheapest here. Like here it is. Like essentially, it's going to give me the page which says, like, click here to confirm the purchase. And so I didn't see with my human eyes any of that advertising. So that's all lost. And that is, I will concede, a major concern for a company like Google, which is leading, like they're building their own AI agents, but they got to really fundamentally re-engineer their revenue model essentially, because like SEO and advertising and all that stuff is going to become kind of irrelevant in the future.
Yeah, it's hard to think that a pillar of the world's like Mag 7 market like Google could lose its fundamental source of income. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, certainly when it comes to like buying, I do like this ARK quote: one click checkout should give way to one query purchasing. I think that's quite a smart way of thinking about at least that particular use case, which is like I have an intent and I want to buy a thing. If I want to research something though, and I suppose it's the same thing, like I'm using agents today or different more sophisticated research models to go and do the research and distill them back into something for me.
This reminds me that one of the companies that I think we've studied quite a bit over the many years is TTD, Trade Desk.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if this is even more in the crosshairs than Google might be, or as much. I don't know. But exactly one of those companies that I'm thinking of, forgive me for saying this, like even something like CrowdStrike, where that moat that was once impenetrable, I don't know what the AI is going to be able to do and whether it's sophisticated enough to really completely make an entire industry sort of just
Right.
other. And thereby, unless the fundamental company also adapts and adjusts fast enough that they just don't, they just go away. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right, and ARK agree with you, because ARK are pointing out how, like that point you were just making, like companies like the Trade Desk and Pubmatic and all these guys that are there essentially to put like the right advert in front of your eyeballs to sell you something with that, amazing like auction that takes place in real time. Like a lot of that's just you won't need that stuff. And so I think ARK's data, if we believe it, is telling us that something like 6% of page views are now coming from AI looking at the web, like crawling and figuring stuff out, as opposed to humans. And that's only going to go up. And so that's massively going to reduce the value of like these companies, because they're all about sticking adverts in front of human eyes.
And I keep coming back to the same point, Badger. So I'll speak in my head. So I'll say it out loud. We started the show by talking about acceleration, right?
Mm.
That's, I think, I want to emphasize to our investors. The internet took like whatever 25 years to sort of evolve. I think was a normal evolutionary pace. Maybe it was fast. Maybe it was a fast evolutionary pace. But it would not surprise me in a similar way, like when Kodak lost most of its purpose for existing when digital photos came online and went from film to digital, and that company goes extinct. The rate at which some of these now seemingly strong companies might go extinct because the rate at which the stuff will only increase as the AI agents get faster and better. It might really be a matter of, I don't know, months at some point, like months, year. I don't know. Like I think as an investor right now, I would really encourage everyone to look at your portfolio and at least do the mental framework of, are the companies you're positioned in behind the bulldozer or in front of it? Or alongside the bulldozer or in front of it. Maybe that's the better spatial metaphor. And if you have doubts, just put some asterisk next to that and, do the work and blah, blah, blah. But do not take anything for granted at this point.
Yeah, entirely agree. I've been asking myself that question about my portfolio, and having read the ARK deck, I'm probably going to go back and look at my portfolio again and ask myself more probing questions about some of my holdings.
Right, because to be not cynical, but as much money as can be made during this shift can also be lost if you're not taking this stuff seriously enough, I suppose.
Yeah, totally. Like if you're, again, it points at why the majority of investors should just buy the index, right? Because by definition, like you own in proportion to its size every company in the index, say the S&P, the NASDAQ, whatever index you chose to buy. And you don't have to ask these questions and rebalance, like it all happens for you. But if you're going to be a growth investor, which is like a subset of the different kinds of investor you could be, if you're going to own some of these smaller companies that are ripe for being disruptors, but also being disrupted, you got to keep your eye on that prize and watch. And like things are happening so much faster today than they ever were. And like tomorrow, they'll be happening even faster still. So yeah, like things can happen on a dime. And you might find like Chegg, the homework company that I think, have they now gone into receivership? Oh, no. That's right. They announced a few weeks ago. If you remember them, they were a company that were like helping kids with their homework and do like research. Well, like LLMs smash them because now suddenly kids are just asking like ChatGPT for the answer and to help them understand the topic. Like I think Chegg are now trying to sell their assets, and they were like a multi-$100 million company. Like they've been valued at less than like $10 million, I think, if I've got those numbers right. Like they're worth nothing.
Wild. Yeah.
Hey, oh, well, that was good. That was a deep dive into the ARK Invest deck. If you're listening to this and you found it interesting, like go read the whole deck, 148 pages, skim it, pick out the stuff that interests you. And maybe there's like a slide we didn't touch on where you've got your own thoughts and questions. Like do drop them into the comments on the YouTubes and on the podcasts, and catch us on X. Tell us all about what you think.
Right on. There's so much more to talk about, so maybe we'll revisit it in future episodes, especially, right, if there's a particular segment that you call to our attention.
Yeah.
I want to change topics a little bit to some extent. This is a a fun little story I came across some time ago. I think it was the coach or the head manager of a professional football team hired professional pickpocketers during a team dinner. So, all the athletes were sitting around having a good time. And by the night's end, they didn't have their wallets. And, what's the moral of the story? I suppose it's something like always be paying attention. I want to tie that in with another observation I made this weekend explicitly to myself. It's boggling my mind to the extent of which the price of shares or the volatility that you see, like pre-earnings, post-earnings, the algo driven stuff. It is now like the rate at which like a company releases earnings, then you see the stock price plummet like 18%, but then by day's end it's up 6%, and then that kind of like, what's it called, accordion, going back and forth is faster than ever. And to me, it's palpable. And I think I'm putting these ideas together to say more than ever, it seems like you have to be more vigilant than ever, because the forces acting on your investments is quicker than ever. But also, to your point, that if you remain an investor with, call it, a 3 to 5 year outlook, you can't go much beyond that because things are changing too fast in the other direction, in the long-term direction, then you could sort of not isolate yourself from these wild, rapid changings, but you won't be so affected by them because whether a share price goes down overnight 18% and up 6% the next day, giving you whiplash, you just won't really care that much. But to the pickpocketer's point, I don't know, maybe this seems too cliche to say, but like always be paying attention, but paying attention to what? Paying attention to the bigger picture of your investment's thesis. I don't know if that's useful, Badger.
Yeah, it's good reminder. And like a metaphor, right? Like the future, if you don't keep an eye on it, might like pickpocket your returns because like the world went in a direction you didn't expect and it went so quickly, like you didn't have a chance to react. So suddenly, like you're with the herd selling like after the horse has already bolted out of the gate. This is what we
Yeah,
try and do.
right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I guess to work the metaphor a little bit, how do pickpocketers work? By misdirection to a large extent, right? They want your attention over here. They bump your shoulder. That's what you feel. Meanwhile, their hand is in your other pocket because you can't feel it because you're over here, right? I don't know. I thought it was a cool. I like that the manager did this because they're professionals, right? And even professionals can continue to get better and they lose sight of some things. So I think for investors, it's a good thing to consider. Are you paying attention in the right way to the right things?
I wonder if that is a somewhat of a segue. You're doing well with these segues today, by the way. I wonder if that is a bit of a segue to the Donald Trump quote that you wanted to talk about, or his sequence of Truth Social posts. Because
Oh yeah,
is there some
yeah,
misdirection going on here?
yeah. So I'm gonna speak about this because some of our Patreons over at patreon.com/Wall Street Wildlife, we love you guys. They asked for my comment on this, and first of all, this is that yesterday Trump announced that there's going to be some sort of national level crypto reserve thing made, right? Okay, fine. We know he's a pro crypto president, right? So that's not news. But then he listed the coins that would, he listed examples of the coins that would be in this thing. He listed Solana, XRP, and ADA, right? Well, and then he retweeted and saying, "Oh, and also Bitcoin and Ethereum. I love those too." Man, this is, you know what this is? Given my take on XRP specifically, I see XRP as an actual like failed project compared to Chainlink. So because of my understanding of the space, I'm seeing the president basically promoting one of these meme coins, shit coins that just still has value simply because people say it does, right? Turns out that David Sachs, one of the former All In guys, is now the AI czar helping to implement all these things. Surprise, he is an investor in the company whose top 5 holdings are Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, XRP, and ADA. In other words, when I read the tea leaves, this is almost like literal, blatant corruption. But in the crypto space, it's legal because they're not quite securities or whatever the regulations are. So it's sort of like the problem with lawmakers investing in securities and companies. Well, they make the laws so they know which stocks are going to benefit from the laws that they're elected to implement. Why the whole Nancy Pelosi tracker, right, is such a thing to pay attention to as a citizen, right? Is it fair that she has made so much money as a congressperson? And Congress obviously this is the whole thing. Like, how corrupt is the system? Well, in this crypto space, it's even more mind blowing because it's front and center. It's not even illegal. It's just in your face. And here's Monkey's point. Here's the moral of the story. You would think, as a normal citizen, that what the president promotes is somehow good for the country or good for everyone. No, 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 no. This is almost like, again, like a kind of grifting slash corruption made public, made seductive, made legal or not illegal, whichever way you want to look at it. And unless you've done your work and know that things like XRP is closer, way closer to a gamble and a degenerate thing than it is like, call it good crypto, the way I think of it, then you're going to be completely fleeced, like 100% by the president himself. And in this case, forgive my politics, I do not trust that guy because I think of him as a serial liar. So please be careful, all of you who are sort of following my lead and investing in crypto, and just damn it, be sure that you're not taking these kind of like front and center promotional announcements blindly just because it's the president that's making them. It's like corruption made public is kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, I guess we've
Made legal.
yeah, we've seen multiple examples of this, and not just from like the leader of the US. We've seen it from the leader of Argentina, right? He was caught up in some scandal where either knowingly or unknowingly he endorsed Libra, like another cryptocurrency, and said, "Oh, this is like the future of money for Argentina." And then there was like a rug pull, and a bunch of, I guess, citizens have lost like a ton of cash in that. Trump blatantly did it with Trump coin and Melania coin. And then, allegedly he and his crypto czar maybe have some interests, allegedly have some interests in some of these cryptos. Like, just do your own homework.
Not even right. Not even allegedly. I mean, people uncovered that right before this announcement, there was this massive bet using 50x leverage on the three coins mentioned by Trump's announcement.
Okay. I mean,
So,
I'm protecting us from like David Sachs lawyers, right? Even though we're like nobodies. So I don't know. And I know because I saw like an hour before we recorded, like he's all over Twitter denying like how he's managed his own crypto holdings. So I got no idea. And, whatever we read, don't believe anything you read, right? Like I think there's some kind of investigation going on and something will come out officially at some point. But the main point here is people with influence or insider information, that's like totally illegal in the regular securities world. But if you're a member of Congress, well, this stuff happens. And at the moment, and certainly this administration doesn't look like it's going to be the administration that's going to kind of close down those levels of access and force anyone with that kind of information to either like have their portfolio managed blind or just not be allowed to own stocks.
right. Which one last point occurs to me. In the Chainlink community, there was a lot of grumbling that they didn't mention Chainlink in the list. And now thinking this through, I'm like, thank God they didn't, because I want to keep very clear the sort of like the real stuff from all of the grifting stuff. And so I like this idea of sort of the real project. What's it called? They're going to prove their worth without any of these public campaigns, and then the value, then the fundamentals will rise to the top. So it's sort of a counterintuitive take. People who are doing their work and their research and understanding what's the on the ground fundamentals will benefit because those will win out, and you don't need the pump and dumps.
Great stuff.
This has been a banger. Has this been a banger? Maybe our YouTube commentators can let us know on in the comments. All our fancy wild animals over on Patreon, bless your hearts. Thanks for supporting our work. You know who you are. We're enjoying every second of it.
Yeah, good stuff. Patreon.com/Wall Street Wildlife. We have now actually got merch. We've had our designers been helping us. Like in the last 24 hours, I now have some like fancy images. And as soon as we hang up this recording session, I'm going to try and figure out with Krzysztof how we put the merch on the platform and how we make this work in like a way that's nice for all Patreons. But there's a bunch of other Patreon benefits, like not the least of which is if you're at our capybara tier and above, you don't have to listen to our stinking adverts. Like you get ad-free experience. Yeah, check it out if you enjoy the show, and go give us a thumbs up over there. But otherwise, you can find us at X. I do all my tweeting as at 7 Luke Hallard.
Right. I'm at 7 Flying Platypus.
Very good. Are you ready to become a beast of an investor?
Your journey starts here, animals.
A reminder that the people on this program may hold positions in the companies that are mentioned. Buying and selling stock carries financial risk, which could include loss of capital. The views in this program should not be taken as personalized advice. Before acting on any of the information provided, listeners are encouraged to consult a financial or tax professional.